Hello and welcome to the 17th Annual Women's Fund Celebration here at the Community Foundation. We had hoped to conduct this event in person because we know that you enjoy the fellowship and the connections that happen, but we made this virtual for the second year in a row, given pandemic conditions. I want to thank and acknowledge the board and staff of the Community Foundation, as well as our wonderful team of 5 Community Impact Associates. These are work study students from Cornell University, and a special recognition of the Women's Fund Advisory Committee who put this special event together for you and who work all year long to advance the goals and mission of the Women's Fund. We want to say hello and thank you as well to the Beverly Baker Society donors. These are major donors to the Women's Fund, and all donors and supporters of the work of the Women's Fund, as well as our sponsors. You know, earlier this year, the board and staff took the opportunity to look at our mission statement. We reworked that such that we included in greater foreground focus the concepts of diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And our Women's Fund is one of the original assets of the Community Foundation addressing needs in these categories. And sadly, we still have sexism and misogyny at work in our community, but we want to use the resources here to provide greater opportunity for women and girls to fully participate in all aspects of our community. Your support of the Women's Fund allows that to happen. Perhaps you're watching today with us with other people. If so, we'd love you to indicate that in the chat and the comment section, and you can put questions and comments in that section as well. We look forward to your continued involvement with the work of the Women's Fund and the Community Foundation. Thank you and enjoy today's program.
For 14 years, I've had the privilege of working with the amazing women from our Women's Fund Advisory Committee. I work closely with them as they review grant requests from a wide range of organizations. These have resulted in grants from the Women's Fund, and they have also inspired many grants from other funds here at the Community Foundation in service to women in our communities. Each year brings new faces, new knowledge, new passion to this work. And each year, this event brings the needs and opportunities in service to women to a wide audience, inspiring us to engage in new conversations about needs, barriers, solutions, and new ways to carry out our work. Today, I am excited to introduce 2 guest speakers addressing important women-related issues in our communities. Our first speaker is Heather Campbell, the Executive Director of the Advocacy Center of Tompkins County. The Advocacy Center is the only provider of domestic and sexual violence services in Tompkins County. Like many communities, domestic violence immediately grew with the dawn of the pandemic and unfortunately remains at unprecedented levels. Heather and her team have maintained and expanded services to meet this need, often addressing situations more perilous than those prior to the pandemic. As the Advocacy Center continues to adapt to the ever-changing needs of survivors, they remain committed to the core philosophy of providing compassionate, trauma-informed services. They play a valuable role in providing education as well as services to youth and adult survivors of child sexual abuse, adult sexual assault, and rape. They are grateful for the dedication of their volunteers, staff, and local community, and for the inspiration provided by the survivors who honor us with their stories and strength. We are grateful to have Heather join us today. Our second speaker is Gladys Brangman. Gladys is at her best when serving others and has set out to make the local small business world more profitable. She does this by offering support services and networking opportunities for all types of businesses. Her most recent venture is Business Leaders of Colors, also known as BLOC, a local network designed to support small businesses. Gladys believes that if business leaders of color are going to thrive, they need to be aware of and support one another. A gathering to celebrate Black History Month 5 years ago transformed into a network that transformed into a business. BLOC offers reduced-cost business and financial training, marketing, a web presence, and networking opportunities. BLOC is dedicated to making an impact and to bringing change, including, but not limited to, advocacy, networking, and training for women-owned businesses, which she will share more about. Originally from Albany, New York, Gladys came to the area to study at Cortland State and has lived in the Ithaca area for the better part of 30 years. She makes her home in Lansing, teaches dance when she can, and believes that there is no higher calling than that of a servant. Please welcome our guest speakers, Heather Campbell and Gladys Brangman.
I'm so glad to join you today to talk about the needs of survivors of abuse in our community, and in particular, the ways that the pandemic has impacted women experiencing domestic and sexual violence. The Advocacy Center works to increase safety and reduce the trauma for those impacted by domestic and sexual violence. Over the past 18 months, it's been clear that the pandemic has made survivors of abuse more isolated and less safe. Women were disproportionately impacted. Relationships, employment, school, daycare, and services were all disrupted during the pandemic, and many survivors found themselves cut off from their natural support systems, and in some cases, sheltering in place with someone who was not safe for themselves or their children. During the pandemic, our staff saw the needs of domestic and sexual violence victims grow substantially. We had an historic increase in demand for services, particularly for women who were experiencing domestic violence, where we saw a large increase over the last 18 months. And even more concerning, survivors were coming to us with situations that were more complicated and more dangerous. Our staff initially assumed that the community need would begin to fall as we moved through the pandemic. However, that has not been what has happened. In fact, we reached a new record for hotline calls this past August. The need in our community is higher than ever. Despite this, survivors and our staff have adapted to situations and circumstances that we couldn't have imagined 2 years ago. With creativity, courage, and perseverance, women have found ways to keep themselves and their children safe and to find support and connection. And they keep doing it day after day and month after month. And our dedicated staff, our advocates and educators, our attorney, therapists, and administrators have persevered as well. They stepped up and met client and community needs under extraordinarily difficult personal and professional circumstances. I am so proud of the work of our staff over the past 18 months. Faced with new and unprecedented challenges, we were flexible in ways that we had never before thought possible, and expanded our services to truly be responsive to what survivors were facing. When courts closed to all but emergency petitions and victims were unable to access protections, our attorney moved swiftly, and we were filing emergency virtual petitions within 48 hours of the lockdown. This resulted in a record number of survivors, mostly women, needing our legal representation. To expand our capacity, we added a paralegal so we could meet this need. When our education staff saw a sharp increase in calls from neighbors, employers, teachers, and others who had concerns about vulnerable women and children but didn't know what to do, our educators began targeted social media campaigns, developed online programs, wrote blog posts, and created resource guides to make sure that the community knew that we were still here and how they could do things to increase safety. And while it would have been easy to delay planned projects and agency growth considering all that we were facing, we knew how important these projects were for survivors, and we found a way to move forward. Before the pandemic, survivors often faced long wait lists for trauma-informed therapy. During the pandemic, this got even worse. Knowing how critical mental health support is for all survivors, we moved forward with plans to develop new clinical therapy services, and we hired our first therapist on March 13th, 2020, the day that our agency started lockdown. We hired a second therapist 2 months later, and they are filling an important gap for survivors who likely would not have otherwise been able to access high-quality trauma therapy services. One of the things our staff was most concerned about was the lack of support for children at risk of child sexual abuse. Daycares and schools were closed, and some of the most vulnerable youth didn't have access to supportive adults who could intervene. When a child discloses sexual abuse, we know that the support they receive after that disclosure makes a difference in healing from that trauma. Our Child Advocacy Center program works to support youth from disclosure through healing. And while we intended to expand and relocate the child-friendly interview room in 2022, we knew we couldn't wait that long. So in the summer of 2020, we created a new pandemic-safe family waiting room, an interview room, and observation room in our downtown administrative building. As suspected, reports of child sexual abuse increased when kids went back to school and were in contact with supportive adults who could help. This expansion has not only helped us meet the increased need, but has also significantly improved the experience for children and their families. Through all this, we have been so grateful for our community. Last year, we told our community that we needed their help meeting the needs of survivors, and our community stepped up in very meaningful ways. We were truly moved by the increase in donations from our new and long-standing donors, and also for the notes of support and encouragement that we've received. We've also seen local funders coordinate and work together in new and creative ways, which helped us fill important gaps in our budget and meet these emerging needs. The Community Foundation has been an important partner in our work. In the last 2 years, we've received support from the Women's Fund and the Vector Magnetics Fund for general operational support, and from the Helen T. Howland Foundation and the Sandy and J. True Fund for our new Child Advocacy Center family waiting room. And we received critical support from the Foundation's COVID-19 Response Fund for emergency upgrades to our 24-hour hotline. The impact of the Women's Fund may be most evident in the development of our Urgent Needs Fund. This fund provides direct, one-time financial assistance to survivors of domestic and sexual violence to meet an urgent need that will improve their immediate safety and support healing. It's a critical tool that helps survivors overcome barriers that would otherwise be insurmountable. The Women's Fund was an early supporter of our Urgent Needs Fund. And through that initial Women's Fund application, we reached new donors who have continued to support the fund through donor-directed gifts. And this support of the Urgent Needs Fund was more important than ever in the past year. With the support of these donors, this year we've already helped 70 women overcome financial barriers to safety and healing. So I thank you all for the individual and collective actions that work to create change. If there is anything that the pandemic has taught us, it is that we all have a role in building a safe and healthy community for everyone. In the past year, we have witnessed the ways that everyday actions of everyday people can change lives. The neighbor who notices that something is not right and asks. The coach who checks in with their athlete and listens. The employer who sees past the performance issue to ask, "Is everything all right at home?" These are things that you can do too. Educate yourself about how to recognize signs of domestic violence. Learn how to respond if somebody tells you they were sexually abused. Find ways to challenge harmful messages that support abuse and blame victims. Whether you know it or not, everyone knows someone who has experienced domestic or sexual violence. This is a community problem that requires a community solution. I invite you to join us in our efforts and in this conversation. If you'd like to know more, please join me at the upcoming Let's Talk session with the Community Foundation, where we'll dig deeper into the needs of survivors and how we can create change. Thank you again for the opportunity to share more about the needs of survivors and for the work of the Women's Fund to raise awareness.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss my passion, which is the work I do with the Business Leaders of Colors community. Business Leaders of Colors began in 2016 with the help of a friend, Bob Rossi. He was looking to get more women and people of color into his business, The Common Spot. We decided to have an event to introduce the community of color to The Common Spot, and we called the event Business Leaders of Color. To our surprise, 40 people showed up, and along with them came various unmet needs. Many business owners needed tools that help make a business successful, such as a good website, business cards, a marketing plan, sales plan, a good solid business plan so that they could get financing. My desire to meet the needs of the women and Black and brown business community is how Business Leaders of Colors came into being. Since we're talking about resilience, let's define it. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And we have many amazing, resilient female entrepreneurs in our community. As women, we've been doing this our entire lives, only we didn't call it resilience. We called it survival. Anita Roddick, founder of The Body Shop, stated that nobody talks about entrepreneurship as survival, but that's exactly what it is and what nurtures creative thinking. There is one woman in the Business Leaders of Colors network who truly stands out. What makes her so visible was her ability to pivot during the pandemic and take advantage of local resources, but more about her later. I'd like to share with you a list of a few female entrepreneur survivors. These are businesses, many of which you probably haven't heard of. Barbara Jem Jordan, health and life nutrition coach. Sheila Squire, SAS Consulting. Carol Hill, Just Chill Custom Gifting. Her business thrived during the pandemic. Shantae Butler, Butler Burt Cleaning Services, formed during the pandemic. Nicole Gensch, Health and Business Staffing Agency. Susie Gutierrez, Vegan Epicure, Susie Seitan. Janie Bibby, published 3 books during the pandemic. Cynthia Orsi, life and executive coach. Covered in Majesty, maker of lap scarves out of Rochester, New York. The Reverend Olivia Armstrong, Rainbow Healing Center. Millicent Maynard Clark, Teacher on the Go Consulting. Virginia Walsh, Joyful Day Ceremonies. Cammie Johnson, Empathy for Kids. Kelly White, Illume Projects. Michelle Berry, Courtney Consulting Enterprises. Shira Evergreen, Uplifted Ithaca. Susan Rausch, Earth Connection, Survivor. Elizabeth King, Mojo's Sauce. Deborah DiLorenzo, Life Coaching. Ariel Coral, Meraki Skin Company. Serenity's Boutique, formed during the pandemic. And Kathy Servos, Servos Virtual Services, Survivor. These are all businesses that thrived in one way or another. When the going gets tough, the tough get busy. And that's exactly what these women did. And my final business to mention is Bailey Cravings, Tall Cone, Survivor. When the pandemic hit, all of Tall's business was canceled. Cornell, weddings, everything. What Tall did was pivot beautifully and started offering Friday meals for pickup. I'm guessing some of you are nodding your heads right now because you've had Tall's food and you know how truly amazing it is. Tall added a Friday pickup menu to her site and began taking orders. Business continued because Tall is a survivor. Ariana Huffington, editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post, said fearlessness is not the absence of fear. It's about getting up one more time, then we fall down. Please check out the many businesses currently in survival mode on the Business Leaders of Colors website. Just look for the members page. These female entrepreneurs that I mentioned kept businesses running even when the money ran out. And that is survival. Thank you.
y'all. I'm Stacy Murphy. Currently, I chair the Women's Fund Advisory Committee, a terrific, energized, thoughtful bunch of women. In addition to giving my time, I'm also one of the sponsors of this program through my business, Murphy Grant Consulting, and have been a donor for a few years. I support the Women's Fund because I believe in supporting women. Throughout my life, professional and personal, I've been able to find work and ways of being in the world that feel meaningful, that my efforts and attention can benefit others. I know I'm in good company here with you all watching and valuing a mission-driven life. I give to the Women's Fund because I know the need is there. I know that organizations like the Advocacy Center and others you've heard about today who've received our grants meet critical needs and are also engaged in bigger picture questions that can lead to lasting improvements. A few years ago, thanks to a training by Roxy Bahar-Hewertson, the concept of a ripple effect became ingrained in me. You probably know it. It's the idea that our impact is like a stone breaking the surface of a pond, and even a pebble can go on to do great things as its ripple moves outward, engaging more molecules in its path. Only with grants, it's people we're engaging, hope that is spreading at a circle that's widening. Resilience also plays a part in why I give. The Community Foundation staff and leadership do not shy away from asking important questions around paradigm shifts. The Foundation takes action in its governance and grant-making that will help us become a truly inclusive, equitable, and just society. While resilience in the face of hardship is admirable, it has been required more by people who are not white, who are women, who have barriers, or who are otherwise marginalized. It'd be wonderful to have conditions in the world that require less fortitude from so many people. Thanks for considering this perspective, and thank you to the Foundation for letting me share it. And thank you all who also give in support of making things better in Tompkins County, and who might consider a donation as part of your ripple effect.
My name is Tiara Labrada, and I am a member of the Women's Fund Committee. And it is now my honor to present the Laura Holmberg Award. Each year since 2005, the Women's Fund Committee has been moved by the nominations, uplifting stories of women who make our community a special place to call home. This year's recipient truly personifies the spirit of Laura Holmberg, as she prefers to fly under the radar and work behind the scenes. And that is what makes giving away this award so special. We love celebrating a legacy of volunteerism for those who ask for nothing in return. This year's 2021 Laura Holmberg Award winner is Sandy True. The Women's Fund Committee was humbled by the multiple nominations of Sandy and of her story and commitment to helping others. To hear more about Sandy, I'd like to now introduce one of her nominators, Mary Granger.
I'm Mary Granger, Sandy's friend since we became sorority sisters in college, and one of her nominators for this honor. Firstly to Sandy, I know you very well and know you aren't comfortable with honors. However, I hope you will soak in the love of our community that it represents, and know that your story becomes part of how you inspire others. To today's participants and those viewing the recording, I'm beyond thrilled to help recognize Sandy, who perfectly fits the Laura Holmberg Award, since she is a shero whose contributions as a volunteer align with the Community Foundation's Women's Fund, and with Laura's own commitments to public education, elder services, and women's access to health care. Sandy's leadership across the community in the past 3 decades were detailed in the nomination, and I'll highlight a few, but I think it's particularly appropriate to connect today's theme, resilience in action, with how she's spent her energy and continued her impact since the world has been turned upside down. Before March 2020 and since then, Sandy provides care to those in need. Sometimes her advanced education in nursing shines through as she watches over neighbors, family, friends, those without nearby family, the old and the young, service workers, students, teachers, and maybe you if you encountered her in a vaccine clinic. In addition to personally helping other people during this isolating time, she spearheaded 2 new initiatives, honoring lives that ended too soon. The Hug event last week, Healing and Unity for Greg, and A Future, Running to Places Show and Fund in memory of Becky Ryan. She and Jay are financially supportive of all of Sandy's projects, as well as countless other community needs. I'll list a few of her projects while also celebrating that Sandy's goals include building the strength and sustainability of each organization as she goes. Planned Parenthood's Ithaca Health Center's Time to Build campaign succeeded with her as a tri-chair. Family and Children's Service benefited from her board service and development efforts, chief among them 20 years of Cayuga at Twilight fund and fundraising events, and co-chairing the capital campaign. As an alumna of the Ithaca schools and as son Alex's parent, her leadership roles included with the Northeast PTA, the Ithaca High Alumni and Friends, the Spelling Bee and teacher grants of the Ithaca Public Education Initiative, and with College Mentors for Kids. I've gone over my allotted time, so we'll conclude by simply saying to Sandy, the Ithaca community thanks you and wouldn't be the same without you.
I am deeply grateful for this award and thank Stacy Murphy and her committee and the Community Foundation for this great honor. I am also humbled to join the amazing list of women who have received this award in the past, many of whom have been my mentors over the years. This award is a lovely way for the Holmberg family to honor their mother. I am sure they observed her giving back to the community as they were growing up and saw its impact. I was fortunate to have parents that also shared the desire to help others. For example, my father would cut wood for the Sertoma Club for heating in the winter. My mother would deliver flowers at a church for the shut-ins. So this giving of yourself was part of my growing up life, and I continue to enjoy making giving a fun and satisfying part of my life today. I am one of those quirky people that truly enjoy fundraising. A dear friend described my role as connecting all the dots. I hear about a need, I gather the backstory about the need, I share the story with others, and hopefully fulfill the need. There is a selfish part of what I do. I love the connection with others and the bonds that develop as we work together to fill a gap in our community. I think we can all agree that our community is filled with special people who are willing to help. Another aspect of my storytelling is that there's an educational piece to the sharing. I can share the resources that are available in our community that their family or friends may need in the future. I have been blessed to have the time and resources to help our community be a special place. But I couldn't have done it without my husband, Jay, who shares the belief that we all have a responsibility to give back. As we all struggle today with the current pandemic and its challenges, I am hopeful that people will look inward and offer their time, their skills, or their finances to continue to make this community something special for all. Thank you again for this wonderful award.
Hello again, and thanks so much for being a part of our Women's Fund celebration. You've heard a lot about resilience today, and in the last year, I bet, probably heard resilience invoked more often than you can count. How many times have you been called resilient? Or been called upon to be resilient? Or heard children in your life termed resilient? Resilient is a positive trait, something a lot of women have in common, men too. I know there's some of you watching. We honor it. Notice it in the actions of people we've come to regard as consistent, driven, courageous. Today, you've witnessed it in our neighbors that we've highlighted here. I hope you've found their efforts and actions inspiring as I have. One friend the other day noted that throughout the pandemic times, it's been meaningful and hopeful for her to see women she's never known finding their footing in the response, emerge and become known. Women who may not have been seen before. Our everyday actions count too in that fortitude column. Resilience, though, can have a darker aspect for those prone to carrying burdens or to comparing themselves unfairly to others, perhaps thinking wrongly that it's never enough. I bring that up today because I hear women who feel that about themselves or are just tired. One quote I read Monday was by a person named Zandeshe Lorelia Brown, and I'll paraphrase it for here. They said, "I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want ease, not to be patted on the back for how well I take a hit or for how many." I know I've had that feeling. It can be too easy to turn capability into a burden or some impossible horizon to reach without even realizing it, especially for those in helping professions. It's a good thing to unlearn or to balance with a bit of that ease or some support. But that can be hard to do for women who are used to being the shoulder rather than leaning on one. I just want to say I see you, and that we need balance. Resilience actually depends on it. Yours, mine, all of ours together. So as we close today's program, thank you for being here, and I invite you to find and honor something about yourself today, however big, however small. You can add it to the YouTube chat if you want. Go ahead. Is it easier to see those imprints of resilience in others in your life, the women in your world? Great. Tell them about it. Light them up. But for everyone else you make smile today, do the same for yourself. Get your own glow going and let it feel nourishing, because we need to be this for ourselves once in a while to keep the whole thing moving forward for others. Again, thanks for being here so much on behalf of the Women's Fund at, as George often says, your community foundation.